In the previous Sarga, Daśaratha performed the sacred Putrakāmeṣṭi Yajña, the Vedic rite undertaken for the blessing of worthy sons. At that very time, in the celestial assembly, the Devas appealed to Bhagavān Narayana to deliver the three worlds from the tyranny of Ṛāvaṇa. We now continue that divine conversation and witness the moment when the destiny of the worlds begins to unfold. Tato Narayano Viṣṇirnuyuktaha surasattamayhi janannapi suranevam shlakṣṇam vachanam abravīt. Upāyaha ko vadhe tasya rakṣasadhipatehe suraha yamaham tam samasthāya nihānyam Ṛṣikantakam. Eva muktāha suraha sarve pratyuchur Viṣṇumavavyayam manusham rūpamasthāya Ṛāvaṇam jahi samyuge. Sahitepe tapastīvram dirghakalam arindamaha yena tushto bhavat brahma lokakrulloka purvajaha. Santushtaha pradadau tasmai rakshasaya varam prabhu nana vidhebhyo bhutebhyo bhayam nanyatra manushat. Avagyataha puratena varadanehi manavaha evam pitamahat tasmad varadanena garvitaha. Utsadayati lokam strin striyaschapyupakarshati tasmat tasya vado drushto manushebhyah parantapa. Ityetad vachanam shrutva suranam Viṣṇuratmavan pitaram rochayamasa tada Daśaratham nrupam. Sachapya putro nrupatis tasmin kale mahadhyutihi ayachat putriya mishthim putrep surari sudanaha. Sakrutva nischayam Viṣṇu Ramantraya cha pitamaham antardhanam gato devaihi pujyamano maharshibihi. Tato vai yajamanasya pavakat atula prabham pradurbhutam mahadbhutam mahaviryam mahabalam. Krishnam raktambaradharam raktasyam dungdubhisvanam snigdha haryakshata anuja shmashrupravara murthajam. Shubhalakshana sampannam divyabharana bhushitam shaila shrunga samutsedham drupta shardula vikramam. Divakara samakaram deeptanala shikhopamam tapta jambu nadamiyam rajatanta parichhadam. Divya Pāyasa sampurnam patrim patni miva priyam pragruhya vipulam dodbhyam swayam maya mayi miva. Samaveksha bravit vakyamidam Daśaratham nrupam prajapatyam naram vidhi mam ihabhyagatam nrupa. Tataha param tada raja pratyuvacha krutanjalihi Bhagavan svagatam testu kimaham karvani te. Atho punara idam vakyam prajapatyo naro bravit rajanarchayata devanadhya praptamidam tvaya. Idam trunrupashardula pāyasam deva nirmitam prajakaram gruhnam tvam dhanyamarokya vardhanam. Bharyanam anurupanam ashniteti prayachavai tasutvam lapsyase putran yadartham yajase nrupa. Tatheti nrupatihi prītaha shirasa pratigruhyatam patrim devanna sampurnam devatattam hiranmayim. Abhivadyacha tadbhuta mahadbhutam priyadarshanam muda paramaya yuktaschakaraabhi pradakshinam. Tato Daśarataha prapya pāyasam deva nirmitam babhuva parama prītaha prapya vittamivadhanaha. Tatastat adbhuta prakhyam bhutam paramabhaswaram samvartayitva tat karma tatraivantaradhiyata. हर्षरश्मिभिरुद्योतं तस्यान्तः पुरमाबभौ शारथस्य अभिरामस्य चन्द्रस्येव नभोषुभिः. सो अन्तःपुरं प्रविश्यैव कौसल्यामिदमब्रवीत् पायसं प्रतिगृह्णीष्व पुत्रीयं त्विदमात्मनः. कौसल्यायै नरपतिः पायसार्धं ददौ तदा अर्थार्थं ददौ चापि सुमित्रायै नराधिपः. कैकेय्यै चावशिष्टार्थं ददौ पुत्रार्थकारणात् प्रददौ चावशिष्टार्थं पायसस्यामृतोपमम्. अनुच्चिन्त्य सुमित्रायै पुनरेव महामतिः एवं तासां ददौ राजा भार्याणां पायसं पृथक्. ताश्चैवं पायसं प्राप्य नरेन्द्रोऽस्योत्तमस्त्रियः सम्मानं मेनिरे सर्वाः प्रहर्षोदितचेतसः. ततस्तु ताः प्राश्यतमुत्तमस्त्रियो महीपतेरुत्तमपायसं पृथक्. हुताशना आदित्यसमानतेजसो अचिरेण गर्भान् प्रतिपेदिरे तदा. ततस्तु राजा प्रतिवीक्षताः स्त्रियः प्ररूढगर्भाः प्रतिलब्धमानसः. बभूव हृष्टस्त्रिदिवे यथा हरिः सुरेन्द्रसिद्धर्षिगणाभिपूजितः. The earnest appeal of the Devatas had come to an end. The celestial assembly fell silent. All eyes turned towards Bhagavān Narayana. Though he already knew all that has transpired and all that was yet to unfold, he had patiently listened to their plea. Then, having been entreated by the foremost of the Devatas, Bhagavān Narayana addressed them with gentle and gracious words. He said, "O Devatas, tell me, by what means shall I bring about the destruction of that lord of the Rakshasas, the tormentor of the Ṛṣis? By what course shall I proceed to slay him?" And the Devatas replied in one voice, "O Avyaya, the imperishable one, assume a human form and slay Ṛavaṇa in a battle." Ṛavaṇa performed intense tapasya for a very long time. Such was the severity of his tapasya that Brahma, the Srishtikarta, became pleased with him. In his satisfaction, the Srishtikarta Brahma granted Ṛavaṇa a mighty boon. From the countless orders of living beings, he would have nothing to fear. Yet there was one being from whom he had sought no protection, a human being. When Ṛavaṇa sought this boon, he regarded human beings as too insignificant to be feared. He therefore never asked Brahma for protection from them. Having obtained the boon, he became consumed with pride. He ravaged the three worlds and oppressed all who stood in his path. Yet, in the very arrogance with which he dismissed mankind, lay the seed of his own destruction. Therefore, O Paramtapa, it is only through a human being that Ṛavaṇa's end shall come. Having heard the words of the Devatas, Bhagavān Viṣṇu, ever serene and self-possessed, resolved to descend upon earth in human form. He chose the noble Daśaratha as his father upon earth. And at that very time, the illustrious Daśaratha, still without a son, was performing the Putrakāmeṣṭi Yajña for the blessing of children, earnestly praying for a worthy offspring. Having thus resolved upon his course, Bhagavān Viṣṇu then respectfully took leave of Srishtikarta Brahma. Honored by the assembled Devas and Maharshis, he vanished from their sight, setting in motion the divine incarnation that would soon unfold upon earth. At that very moment, something extraordinary occurred within Daśaratha's Yajña. From the sacred fire, there emerged a magnificent being. His radiance surpassed all earthly splendor. Dark in complexion and clothed in crimson garments, he stood resplendent with celestial ornaments, towering like the summit of a mighty mountain. His deep voice rolled like a celestial kettle drum, while every aspect of his form proclaimed divine majesty. In his mighty arms, he carried a magnificent vessel. It blazed like the crest of a sacred fire and shone with the brilliance of the sun. Fashioned from refined gold with a gleaming silver rim, it was filled to the brim with divine Pāyasa, a celestial sanctified preparation bestowed through the Yajña. Casting his gaze upon Daśaratha, the radiant being spoke. The Yajña-Puruṣa said, "O Rajan, know me to be a messenger of Prajapati. Through your devoted worship of the Devas, you have today been blessed with this divine gift. Receive this sacred Pāyasam prepared by the Devas themselves. Through it you shall obtain the sons for whose sake you have performed this sacred Yajña. It is auspicious and promotes health and well-being. Distribute it amongst your queens in the proper measure, that each may partake of it." With folded hands then, Daśaratha bowed before the radiant messenger. He said, "O Bhagavan, blessed indeed am I by your arrival." And with profound joy, he accepted the golden vessel filled with the divine Pāyasam. Then, offering his respectful salutations to the wondrous being, he reverently circumambulated him. His sacred mission now complete, the radiant messenger vanished from sight. Daśaratha stood, filled with boundless joy, like a man long deprived of wealth, who had suddenly discovered a priceless treasure. Bearing the divine Pāyasam, Daśaratha then entered the royal inner palace. The joy within his heart seemed to illuminate the entire palace, which shone with serene splendor like the clear autumn sky bathed in the gentle radiance of the full moon. Approaching the Queen Kausalyā, Daśaratha said, "Receive this sacred Pāyasam. It has been bestowed for the blessing of sons." He first gave one half of the divine Pāyasam to the Queen Kausalyā. From the portion that remained, he gave one half to the Queen Sumitrā. Of the remainder, he gave one portion to the Queen Kaikeyī. Then, after a moment's reflection, the wise emperor took the final portion of the divine nectar-like Pāyasam and once again gave it to the Queen Sumitrā. And thus the sacred Pāyasam was distributed amongst the three queens. They received the divine gift with reverence, each regarding it as a great honor and blessing. Their hearts overflowed with joy, for the fruit of the sacred Yajña had at last been bestowed upon them. And in due course, the three queens partook of the sacred Pāyasam according to the portion each had received. Before long, they conceived. Within their wombs grew children whose radiance would one day shine with the brilliance of the sacred fire and the splendor of the sun. When Daśaratha beheld his queens carrying the divine gift of new life within them, the burden he had borne for so many years was finally lifted. His deepest longing had been fulfilled. Daśaratha rejoiced with boundless happiness, just as Hari rejoices in the celestial realms when honored by Indra, the Siddhas, and the hosts of Maharishis. The prayer of Daśaratha has been answered. The promise made before the assembled Devas had begun to unfold. The wheel of destiny had turned. Within the wombs of the three queens now rested the future of the Ikṣvaku dynasty and the hope of the three worlds. In the upcoming Sargas, we shall witness the birth of the four princes, whose lives will forever transform the destiny of the Ikṣvaku dynasty and of the world itself. We have now witnessed one of the most sacred moments in the Ramayana. Daśaratha has successfully completed not one but two of the greatest yajñas. The mighty Ashwamedha Yajña, followed by the Putrakāmeṣṭi Yajña. We witnessed Rishishringa Maharishi's Vaksiddhi, the perfection of his speech, where every word he uttered manifested as reality itself. His blessing was fulfilled. 4 illustrious sons would soon be born, he said. And yet, this Sarga was about so much more than the birth of 4 princes. For a brief moment, our gaze was lifted beyond Ayodhyā, beyond the Ikṣvaku dynasty, beyond this very yuga. We witnessed the Devatas approach Srishtikarta Brahma and Bhagavān Narayana, not for themselves, but for the welfare of all beings. We also glimpsed a mystery hidden deep within the distant past. the story of Jaya and Vijaya, the guardians of the Vaikuntha. Bhagavān Viṣṇu himself offered them a choice: 7 birds as his devotees, or 3 birds as his adversaries. They chose 3. And thus Ṛāvaṇa was not merely born. He arrived carrying with him an ancient destiny. But before we continue, we must pause, because the Ramayana is not merely telling us what happened. It is also revealing why beings act as they do. Why does one being incline towards compassion, another towards ambition, and another towards domination? Why does one protect while another seeks to possess? Why does one surrender to dharma while another bends even knowledge towards power? Our Ṛṣis of antiquity did not see these differences as accidental. They understood that every embodied being carries a particular svabhava, an inner nature. Yet this raises a deeper question. What is it that shapes the nature of every living being? Is it merely circumstance, or is there something more fundamental? To answer that, our Ṛṣis turned their attention inward. They asked not merely, "Who am I?" but "What is it that I truly am?" They discovered that no 2 minds are identical. No 2 temperaments are identical. No 2 inner worlds are identical. Just as a forest contains many different trees, human beings too are simply expressions of nature. Pause for a moment and picture a great forest. Some trees bear sweet fruit, yet others provide cool shade. Some grow tall and unyielding against fierce winds, while others spread gently across the earth. Which tree is superior? None. Each simply expresses its own nature. We too are a part of the same nature, not very different to the very trees in the forest. Among the many ways our tradition contemplates human nature is the idea of a gana. 3 ganas are traditionally spoken of: Devagana, Manushyagana, and Rakshasagana. The moment we hear these names, our minds immediately begin to judge. One must be better, another must be worse. But perhaps the very habit of judging is what prevents our understanding. These ganas are not labels, nor are they prisons. They are simply mirrors. They help us observe the dominant tendencies moving within us. Not to judge ourselves, but rather to know ourselves. Because without knowing our true nature, how can we ever hope to transcend it? A person in whom the Devagana predominates often carries a quiet gentleness. Humility comes naturally. Compassion comes naturally. Truthfulness, empathy, and a love for harmony. Yet every strength carries within it its own challenge. Sometimes they avoid necessary conflict. Sometimes they surrender too easily. Sometimes they trust when discernment was required. Even goodness must be guided by viveka or discernment. The Manushya-gana perhaps describes most of us. Within this nature, two worlds constantly meet: the material and the spiritual. One moment we pursue success with tremendous enthusiasm, and in the next we ask ourselves, will any of this truly make me happy? We long for achievement, yet we long for peace. We desire recognition, yet we also seek freedom from recognition. Our lives often resemble someone trying to sail with one foot in two different boats. Yet perhaps this is not our weakness. Perhaps this is our gift. Because only the one who genuinely questions can genuinely discover. After all, inquiry is the bridge between knowledge and wisdom. And then there is the Rakshasa-gana, perhaps the most misunderstood of the three. The moment we hear the word Rakshasa, our imagination rushes to the great battles of the Ramayana, to terrifying forms, to destruction, and to cruelty. But let us pause before we judge. Look a little deeper. What if this Gana is pointing us towards something much more subtle? Have you ever wondered who changes the course of history? Is it ordinary people living ordinary lives? Or is it those who possess an extraordinary intensity, with the courage to stand alone when everyone else disagrees, the strength to pursue a sankalpa, a solemn resolve that others would not even dare to imagine, the willingness to endure hardship, to sacrifice comfort, to refuse surrender. There is something immense about such a nature. Ṛāvaṇa possessed it. No ordinary person could have performed a tapasya for thousands of years. No ordinary person could have mastered the Vedas. He possessed brilliance, leadership, fearlessness, and resolve. The problem was never his strength. The problem was its direction. Power without humility, knowledge without surrender, intensity without dharma. And that is what ultimately consumed him. But the answer is not to extinguish intensity, it is rather to illuminate it with viveka. And yet, understanding our own nature is indeed a beautiful beginning, but it is still only the beginning, because our Ṛṣis never stopped there. They never said, now that you know yourself, the journey is complete. No. They asked an even more astonishing question, one that has echoed through the Upanishads for thousands of years. Who is the one that knows all this? If I can observe my anger, am I anger? If I can observe my fear, am I fear? If I can observe my ambition, am I ambition? If I can observe my compassion, am I compassion? If I can observe my own gana, then who is the observer? This is where the inquiry begins. Not the inquiry into the world, but rather the inquiry into our own selves. Adi Shankaracharya declared that the greatest ignorance of human beings is not the ignorance of the external world. It is ignorance of one's own self. Our Ṛṣis called this inquiry Atmajnana. The knowledge of Atma, the self. Notice, they did not ask us to become someone else. They did not ask us to imitate another. They simply asked us to discover that which has always been present, hidden beneath every thought, every emotion, every identity, even beneath our own gana. So, who am I? And the answer given by our Ṛṣis is both astonishing and profoundly simple. You are not merely the body. You are not merely the mind. You are not merely your thoughts. Nor are you the countless emotions that rise and fall within you. You are that which silently witnesses them all. And it is here that Bhagavān Śrī Krishna reveals one of the most celebrated truths of the Bhagavad Gita. He said, Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, na chainam kledayantyapo, na soshayati marutaha. Weapons cannot cut the Atman, he proclaimed. Fire cannot burn it. Water cannot wet it. Wind cannot dry it. There is a strange omission in this verse. Bhagavān Śrī Krishna mentions earth, fire, water, and air. But he remains silent about the most important element of all, the space, the Akasha. Bhagavān Śrī Krishna speaks of the weapon fashioned from the earth. He speaks of fire, he speaks of water, he speaks of air. 4 of the 5 Mahabhutas are the great elements, but doesn't mention Akasha. Perhaps this is an invitation to contemplate something deeper. Is it that in its tattvam, at its essence, the Mahabhutam most similar to the Atma is Akasha? The Atma, just as Akasha, the sky or the space, is never disturbed, always the unchanging observer. The clouds, similar to our thoughts or emotions, arrive and depart. But at the deepest level, we are the Atma, ever observing but never changing. Your body has changed. Your thoughts have changed. Your beliefs have changed. Your ambitions have changed. Even your personality has changed. Yet something has remained unchanged through every stage of your life. That silent witness, that unchanging presence, our Ṛṣis called it Atma. Not born, not diminished, not destroyed, not touched by success, not wounded by failure. Always present, always aware. And perhaps that is what the Ramayana has been quietly teaching us all along. It is not merely the story of Rama, not merely the story of Ṛāvaṇa. It is also our own story. Sometimes we resemble Rama. Sometimes we resemble Ṛāvaṇa. Sometimes the Deva speaks within us. Sometimes the Manushya struggles. And yet sometimes the Rakshasa burns fiercely. The question is not which Gana appears. The real question is who is aware that it has appeared. When that question arises sincerely, not merely in the intellect, but in the depths of your own being, your journey has already begun. The journey towards Atma Jnana.